Winston Churchill, Britain's Prime Minister from 1940 to 1945 and 1951 to 1955, is accused of crimes that stain his heroic image, policies and orders that led to millions of deaths and untold suffering. From orchestrating the Bengal Famine of 1943, where 3 million Indians starved due to his government actions, to unleashing the brutal black and tans on Irish civilians, ordering the torching of Cork and the Croke Park massacre, to advocating chemical weapons against uncivilized tribes in Iraq and India, and enforcing concentration camps in Kenya. Churchill's legacy is blood-soaked. In this documentary, we dive into the psychological and psychoanalytic forces behind these atrocities, dissecting the mind of a man whose decisions crush lives, using science to unravel what drove him to such catastrophic choices. Why zoom in on Churchill? Because the crimes aren't just historical footnotes. They're a psychological abyss, a chilling study of a leader whose iron will and imperial obsession left millions dead or broken. His actions, steeped in a belief in British supremacy, reveal a psyche ripe for psychoanalytic dissection. Picture this. Bengal, 1943. Skeletal bodies litter Calcutta streets, for millions starving as Churchill diverts grain to British troops and European stockpiles, blaming Indians for breeding like rabbits. Ireland, 1920. The Black and Tans. Churchill's brainchild, burn Cork City to ashes. Gunned down 14 at Croke Park, their bullets ripping through a Gaelic football crowd. Kenya, 1950s. 150,000 Kikuyu herded into concentration camps, tortured with rape, castration, and electric shocks under Churchill's colonial policies. Iraq, 1920. He pushes for asphyxiating bombs to spread a lively terror among Arabs. These aren't murders in a dark alley, but state-sanctioned horrors, driven by a mind that saw entire peoples as pawns, making Churchill a prime case for probing the psychology of power gone wrong. Let's dig into the roots, because even giants like Churchill start small. Born in 1874 at Blenheim Palace, Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill was the son of Lord Randolph Churchill, a Tory politician, and Jenny Jerome, an American socialite. His aristocratic upbringing was gilded but cold. His parents were distant, leaving him with nannies and boarding schools. Attachment theory tells us kids need warm, consistent caregivers to build empathy and trust. Churchill's childhood lacked that. His father was aloof, his mother glamorous but neglectful. At Harrow School, he was a mediocre student, mocked for his lateral lisp, which he fought to overcome with relentless speech practice. Psychoanalytically, this suggests a fragile ego, a boy desperate to prove himself in a world that felt dismissive. His military career began in 1895, serving in India, Sudan, and the Boer War, where he gained fame as a war correspondent. His thirst for glory was clear. He craved recognition, a trait rooted in childhood neglect. By 1900, he was an MP, hopping between liberals and conservatives, always chasing power. Freud's concept of the ID, raw, selfish drives, seems to dominate here. Churchill's need for control and validation, forged in a lonely youth, pushed him toward decisions that prioritized empire over humanity, setting the stage for his darker acts. What kind of mind orders famine-inducing policies or brutal colonial crackdowns? Churchill's psyche was a fortress of ambition, likely tinged with narcissistic personality traits, not the disorder, but a subclinical obsession with greatness. Psychologically, narcissism manifests as a need for admiration and a belief in one's superiority. Churchill's speeches, like his 1940 Blood, Toil, Tears, and Sweat rallying cry, show a man who thrived on being the savior, the indispensable leader. Yet, this same trait made him blind to others' suffering. His dismissal of the Bengal Famine's victims as breeding like rabbits reveals a chilling lack of empathy, a hallmark of psychopathy's milder cousin, antisocial personality disorder traits. Psychoanalytically, Churchill's actions suggest a superego warped by imperial ideology. Freud's superego is our moral compass, shaped by upbringing and culture. Churchill's aristocratic roots and belief in British exceptionalism, social Darwinism, as historian John Charmley notes, made him see non-whites as lesser, their death's collateral damage for empire. His admiration for Mussolini and Franco, noted in Tariq Ali's book, hints at a fascination with authoritarian control, a need to dominate chaos. His relentless drive, fueled by childhood insecurity, turned policies into weapons, each decision a bid to cement his legacy, no matter the cost. Close your eyes and imagine Calcutta, 1943. Emaciated bodies collapse on streets, children's bellies swollen from hunger, for a million dead in the Bengal Famine. Churchill's government exports India's rice to British soldiers in European stockpiles, ignoring pleas from colonial officials. Their fault for breeding, he sneers, per Madhusri Mukherjee's Churchill's secret war. Australian ships laden with wheat sail past starving Calcutta, ordered to the Mediterranean. The streets were a graveyard. A survivor told the Washington Post, bodies rotting under British rule's indifference. Ireland, 1920. Cork City burns. Flames licking the sky as Churchill's black and tans. Ex-soldiers turn paramilitary thugs. Torch homes and shops. At Croke Park, November 21st, 1920, their bullets ripped through a football crowd, killing 14, including a woman and a child. Blood everywhere. A witness told the Irish Times, the stadium a slaughterhouse. Churchill, as war secretary, greenlights this terror to crush Irish independence, calling rebels odd for rejecting British rule. Kenya, 1950s. The Mau Mau rebellion sparks Churchill's wrath. Over 150,000 Kikuyu are herded into concentration camps, tortured with rape, castration, and electric shocks. A nightmare cruelty, a former detainee told The Guardian. Scars still raw decades later. Churchill's colonial policy, rooted in white supremacy, justifies this as civilizing the savage. Iraq, 1920, sees him advocate asphyxiating bombs to terrorize Arabs, per BBC reports. His words chilling, I am strongly in favor of using poison gas against uncivilized tribes. These scenes, bloodless on paper but brutal in impact, are Churchill's legacy of horror. Churchill's victims weren't individuals but entire peoples, Bengalis, Irish, Kikuyu, Arabs, chosen for their defiance or dispensability. Psychologically, his choices reflect a predator's logic. Target the vulnerable or rebellious to assert dominance. The Bengalis were a faceless mass, their starvation a logistical footnote to Churchill's war effort. The Irish, fighting for independence, threatened his beloved empire, making them targets for his black and tans wrath. The Kikuyu, resisting colonial theft of their land, were savages to be crushed. Arabs, in his view, were lower manifestations, per Source News, ripe for chemical terror. Psychoanalytically, object relations theory suggests Churchill saw these groups as extensions of his own insecurities, symbols of chaos he had to control. His childhood neglect left him craving order, and the empire was his canvas. By targeting colonized peoples, he projected his inner turmoil onto them, destroying what he couldn't master. His belief in white superiority, noted by Tariq Ali, made non-whites expendable, their suffering irrelevant to his grand vision. Each victim was a means to an end, proof of his power, his empire's might, his place in history. Churchill's murders were policies, not pistols, but their brutality was no less real. The Bengal Famine was a slow, deliberate starvation. He diverted rice exports, prioritized British troops, and ignored desperate cables from India's viceroy. He didn't care, Mukherjee writes, quoting Churchill's callous dismissal of Indian suffering. In Ireland, his black and tans were a blunt weapon. Ex-soldiers unleashed to burn, loot, and kill. The Croke Park massacre, with 14 gunned down, was no accident but a message. Resist and die. In Kenya, concentration camps were systematic, with torture codified, rape, mutilation, electric shocks, all under Churchill's colonial oversight, per the Washington Post. His push for chemical weapons in Iraq, though vetoed by his cabinet, showed a chilling willingness to innovate terror. Psychologically, these methods reveal a need for control, a hallmark of narcissistic rage when challenged. His policies were calculated, not impulsive, reflecting a mind that saw human lives as chess pieces. Psychoanalytically, his detachment, treating millions as collateral damage, suggests a weak empathic core, a superego warped by imperial ideology. Each act was a ritual of dominance, a way to silence threats to his vision of British greatness. Executed with a statesman's pen but a tyrant's heart. Churchill's crimes didn't lead to Selba Nobel Prize for Literature in 1953, his wartime heroics overshadowing his atrocities. Yet, the world didn't forget. In India, historians like Rajrangusha Mukherjee call him a precipitator of mass killing for the Bengal Famine, per BBC News. In Ireland, the Black and Tans terror made him a pantomime villain, per historian Louise Miskell. Kenya's Kikuyu survivors, interviewed by The Guardian, still curse his name. Iraq's chemical weapons advocacy, though unfulfilled, drew condemnation from Noam Chomsky, who labeled him a war criminal. No police raided his home. No court tried him. But by the 21st century, his legacy was under siege. Tariq Ali's 2022 book Winston Churchill, his times, his crimes, and Shashi Tharoor's inglorious empire fueled global debate, with ex-posts like at Sully Drummers in 2025 calling him a deeply awful human being for Bengal's 3 million dead. His defenders, like Andrew Roberts, argue he was a man of his time, his racism contextual, not unique. Yet, the bloodstains linger, his policies judged by history's unyielding gaze. What drove Churchill to these horrors? His narcissistic traits, craving admiration, believing in British superiority, made him see colonized peoples as obstacles, not humans. Psychologically, his lack of empathy aligns with subclinical ASPD traits. No remorse for Bengal's starving, no regret for Ireland's dead. His childhood neglect with distant parents and relentless bullying at Harrow left with a void he filled with glory. Psychoanalytically, his crimes were projections of this void, destroying others to feel whole. His obsession with empire, per John Charmley, was a defense mechanism, a way to shield his fragile ego from a world that once mocked him. His alcoholism, noted in biographies, likely amplified his callousness, lowering inhibitions as he signed off on brutal policies. His admiration for Mussolini, what a man, he gushed in 1927, suggests a fascination with power's raw edge, a trait Freud might tie to an overactive ID, unchecked by a moral superego. Churchill wasn't a serial killer, but his decisions killed millions, driven by a psyche that prized legacy over lives, order over humanity. Churchill died in 1965, aged 90, a national hero, his funeral a global spectacle. No handcuffs, no gallows, just honors and statues. He stepped down as PM in 1955, his health failing, his legacy cemented by wartime victories. But history's verdict is split. The Bengal Famine, Ireland's terror, Kenya's camps, Iraq's near gassing, these haunt his name. By 2025, ex-posts like at Tunis Tribunes highlight his Black and Tans atrocities, while scholars like Tharoor call him a mass murderer. His defenders, like Max Hastings, argue context matters. He fought Hitler, saved Britain. But the dead don't forget. Philosophically, Churchill's story is a clash of free will and fate. Existentialism says he chose his path, each policy a deliberate act to preserve empire, to be the hero. But determinism asks, was he trapped by his era, his class, his psyche? A neglected boy, a product of imperial arrogance, shaped by a world that equated might with right. Could he have chosen differently? His legacy is a paradox. A savior who's slaughtered, a hero whose hands drip with blood, a man whose choices ask us away the cost of power. Churchill's shadow looms large, statues in London, his face on coins, yet his name sparks rage in India, Ireland, Kenya. His crimes weren't knives in the dark, but policies that killed millions, burned cities, tortured thousands. Psychologically, he's a case study in narcissism and control, a leader whose need for greatness crushed the vulnerable. His story warns of power unchecked, of a psyche so driven by legacy it ignored the screams. As we close, one truth chills. Heroes could be villains, their choices rippling through history, leaving graves in their wake. How many Churchills walk among us, their crimes cloaked in glory, waiting to be exposed?